Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Rohit Malhotra from Soil School of Business Design, and today I'm here to, have an interaction with all of you. I think I'd like to start with explaining to you that I'll be basically teaching accounting and economics here in the first year, and in term one, they would be having an accounting course. I'll be dealing with that course. And in accounting, at the School of Business Design, the idea of the teaching pedagogy is to inculcate the aspects of design thinking and liberal arts. So, unlike a traditional way of teaching accounting, which will, limit to the quantitative side, the idea of introducing accounting in design thinking is particularly to take into account the the interpretive or the symbolic methodologies, under which one of the aspect which I'd like to highlight today is called interpretive anthropology. So I like to highlight this by giving you some example, and then I'll come back to whatever queries you may be having. So one of the aspect which the accounting people may be having is that how is accounting and anthropology are connected together. I would like to take all of you to the very, very important aspect of what from where the accounting had started, from where this modern accounting, which we see today, has originated. It has started from Italy. It has started from the place called Tuscon, where Lucas Pacioli, if everybody knows, he was the Venetian monk. He was actually the monk who was having the knowledge of mathematics, particularly algebra. And he was at the time when there was an renaissance which was going on. I am using the term called renaissance because at that time, Lucas Pacioli in particular have realized that the merchants who were actually trading that time, they have got so much of influence in the society, but there was no order, there was no system, there was no record. So what happened was that during his time, he took a challenge and he took something in terms of how to put something in order in terms of the trade which they were doing. So he started with a concept of what we see today as double accounting or double entry accounting or bookkeeping. But this double entry bookkeeping was not the same as what we see today. What is interesting to understand at this moment is that Lucas Pacioli was mainly a person who was having something which we call it as a background of humanitarian understanding. When he proposed to put up something of that sort, he was knowing that there would be a sort of resistance. So he put up concepts like the epigraphs, and he has put in a lot of aspect of humanity and ethos into the system of accounting. So I'll explain you something interesting. Like one of the epigraph which he had introduced while he was writing his famous book, which he had written, is called Sama de Arithmetica, which is actually a mathematics book, but which was later introduced as a book in accounting, and he was then considered as a father of modern accounting. In his book, he mentioned a lot of epigraphs. Like one of the epigraph which he mentioned was, which says that a law-abiding, you know, an institute can only run if people are alert, if they are serious about their society. So for merchants, he was very clear that merchants need to be alert. They need not have to sleep, because law can help only those people in the society who are alert, who are aware about what they are doing. And similarly, he had talked a little bit about more about the society of that time. Now, why this interpretive anthropology as a concept need to be understood when it comes to design thinking? Because accounting in initial phases, even back in Mesopotamia, and if you go back to the history, you found that they were using some sort of symbols. Now, what I mean by symbol is that they were using a technology which unlike today, there were no computers that time. So they were using different sort of, stone cuttings, different kind of symbols there. Sometimes they may be using animals, plants, trees, and so on. All this is important because when they realize that what is the right language which the society of that time could understand, what has happened today at the backdrop of financial crisis is that lot of so-called these accounting firms and other financial institutions which were involved, they were they made the accounting system too complex, and a a person who is involved with these transactions sometimes forget that he or she is also part of the society. And this accounting system has become so complex that today, when you actually see that what has actually happened in a particular crisis, you realize that most of the time the crisis happened because people don't disclose what is truth. They hide that because naturally there is a system of incentives which work for them. So what is the important aspect which comes to accounting today is that why can't we go back to our anthropological, our history, and see that how can accounting be made socially relevant? And I think this is the reason why the concept of interpretive anthropology come into picture. The subject itself looks into a whole lot of areas of epistemology and ontological discussion of accounting subject, and it also take the students into the traditional way of considering the case studies and what is happening in the contemporary world as far as accounting is concerned. But mainly it is also going to cover how the accounting would be understood as a design thinker. And in the design thinking, what is most important is that how close are you with the society, how close you are with the people whom from whom you get your work done. So accounting has to be placed in that way, and I think that is what is going to be the feature of the accounting subject in the soil school of business design. Um as of now, I think this is what I was trying to provide as an input, and I'm more open to have discussions. And if any queries are there, I'll be more open to discuss that. Meanwhile, I just want to give you some highlights about the Soil School of Business Design campus. It is situated in Manesa, and it is the infrastructure is one of its kind, and we have pulled in one of the best faculties in terms of their academic and industry experience. The School of Business Design will concentrate in term one, term two, term three, and of course, first and second year in terms of designing the curriculum in such a way that it will take up all three aspects. That means you would have an accounting and economics and other subjects which are usually taught at the core level, but there would be subjects of liberal arts and design thinking, which will also be the part of the curriculum. And the idea of the pedagogy here is that can we fix up uh, the problems which are there in the society today. So our curriculum would be more focused on how could we take society in perspective and their problems which are there. So, for example, if there is an acute water crisis or issues with health, safety, environment, these issues need to be highlighted, and we will take up different pedagogical experiments, I will call it, in order to see that what best fit in the kind of environment. And under that scenario, we'd also use design thinking, because design thinking is essentially the way out to understand how can we give the best solutions to society. I'm now open to the comments, and if at all anybody has anything to look for. Hi. I would be open to discussion in terms of anything. I think I focused on this aspect in terms of how accounting would be different here. That is, we will be taking an anthropological approach. When I say anthropology, I'm very clear. In anthropology, we are basically looking for how accounting is understood as a language of society. So when it comes to accounting, although it is considered as a numerical subject, but basically the idea is that what fits to the current scenario. For example, if there is a village or there is a community where people are not attuned with the current accounting terminologies, then we need to see that what best fit to bring the order to the system. So, for example, if we want to teach them accounting, we do not have to teach them purely from the debit and credit. We can teach them by simple putting up the symbols in order, because we have to realize that accounting is a man-made science. Accounting is not like a natural science. So we can't keep what we call it as positivist approach. We need to understand that we have to allow the room for people to put a narrative. They need to discuss. I think more important for today's time is that we need to understand that our understanding of a subject as a curriculum is more important to be realized in terms of what is our current setting. That means, can we implement what we are learning right back into our society? Can we actually think about solving some problems? So, from that perspective, SOBD curriculum, particularly in accounting, as I'm mentioning, is going to be very different than rest of the business schools, because the idea is not to resort to the conventional way of teaching, in particularly in terms of just conveying them that how fit the accounting is in terms of the template of science, just limiting to the double entry or double the debit and credit system of accounting. So I think we will be looking forward for involving students in terms of their analytical understanding, but accordingly we also would like to see them be able to experiment, go to the society, move out, see what they observe, and how can they bring back a design approach and solve the problem. So I think accounting has to do with more about bringing an order, bringing a system which perhaps can help them, getting their knowledge of the society. So accounting, or for that matter, other subjects, would basically focus on broadly how community, different organizations, institutions can benefit from the interpretive or anthropological aspects of accounting. So that is what I think would make it very, very different to what other institutions might be looking at. So I think that is what, in principle, would be the case. Well, I think I need to put up this aspect that in businesses today, as we have mentioned, that businesses today are struggling with problems of ethics, problem of transparency, problem of professionalism, problem of the gender biases. I think we have already seen the setback. It is more relevant to the society, where we see the affluence, where we see the have and have-nots, where we see the income disparities. So I think it is far more important, for us to understand that the greatest treasure which we're having, in terms of, if you go back to the history, if you start unbundling them one after the other, we realize that the accounting, the way it was taught and it was perceived as a academic discipline, and the way it was, the delivery and the pedagogy was, during the ancient times, uh, it is exactly is comparatively very, very different today. For example, because of the influence of the capitalism, the accounting has been just used as a subject of numbers, purely a subject of seeking profits, and it was related to only incentivizing. I think this has become more of a selfish, what I call aspect. So economics, as we understood, which is of course the part of accounting, also had been understood more as a utilitarian concept, which limited themselves to these, the self satisfaction or self greed or self, consumption. So I think accounting, or the subject as I've been mentioning to you, uh, would definitely be beneficial for the industry, because we have to come back with that generalization that accounting is not just limited to bringing the facts, you know, to the society. It is also to understand that how can we benefit the society with the help of the tools which you already know. Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you one more interesting part that which relates to the history of accounting. Yeah. So Gaurav, I think what you mentioned is behavioral economics. Yeah. So I think I'll answer this way. I think I'm excited to see that aspect of what we call behavioral economics. I think one way to understand that, if you really go back to the basics, it says that whenever you see any problem, you find the people involved with them. So I think it is quite true that the behavioral economics, as mentioned these years, I think I'm little want to be a little clear on this question. You said behavioral economics is mentioned in this year's economic survey. How will this topic have an impact in future? Well, I think behavioral economics, there is already being discussion being done. We have great many authors who have published. Even the recent Nobel Prize, which was given, was also for the behavioral economist. What we have to understand is that, by the way, when we talk about behavioral economics, it's basically looking forward in terms of taking the psychology and sociology as one subject area, and your traditional economics, mathematics, statistics on the other side. So it basically it's a very very delicate combination of both the subjects, because it has been realized that the kind of economic models which were used, both macro and micro level, particularly in the macro level, they were not able to give you the right forecast, the right direction under which the economy should move. We have seen that even after having the traditional equilibrium models, we have seen that there are still processes which says that there are incomplete markets. We see multiple equilibria. We see that people, particularly the agents, the traders, the stock market brokers, the people who participate in the active markets, they are prone to biases. They are prone to certain I would call it as more psychological biases, cognitive biases. They are influenced by most of the time their family, friends. So there is a question of their rationality. So I think yes, all these questions what you are talking about in terms of this all will imbibe under behavioral economics. And yes, there is a very 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 great future if you can understand that aspect of the humankind. Because and I think the idea of introducing in my topic interpretive anthropology is to an extent the extending this idea of ensuring that you don't fix your template only to the mathematics side or to analytical side. Also to introduce the fact that behavioral economics is a traditionally being understood as a subject which is more relevant for the psychologist or sociologist, because for all good reasons, if you do not understand the human behavior, you cannot understand how they make decisions. So when it comes to the aspect of economics like preferences and how much they are willing to pay for a particular service or product, you also understand that what inspired them when they make this decision. So I think that that way behavioral economist has a very important future, particularly in terms of if you want to look for a career in this direction. Can I see some more? Okay, so I would like to put up one more interesting part in terms of how interesting it could be that if you take up an approach of accounting uh, just as a just as how you deal with your day-to-day problems. So, for example, suppose if you observe that there is some problem, let's say in your close vicinity. You can say, suppose you are daily commuting from your workplace to home and home to workplace daily. You have just commuting, and you find that uh, most of the time you find that the condition of the road, the traffic, it's not working properly, and you feel like there is some disturbance there. So how do you resolve that? So one of the way of resolving it is that you go back and you discuss this with the transport department, and they can do some welfare for you. Other aspect is that you can actually design, some sort of a kind of workable plan, that in case if this problem exists and we are a part of society, how can we resolve that? So design thinking, as what we understood, can help you frame those kind of structures involving particularly the stakeholders, which could be in this case in particular could be the one who are commuters, the traffic policemen, the contractors who constructed the road, and so on and so forth. And then we could have an amicable way to understand that what exactly is the real problem, because in design thinking it's more important to define the problem is not known to us. Problem is not that the roads are bad, but the problem is something lying deep inside. There could be many other aspects which we need to look at, and then we can utilize the concepts of accounting and economics to solve those problems. And I think that's what make the subject of accounting or economics at SOPD much more interesting. Okay, so are there anybody else who would like to add in? I'm I'm still open to have few more comments. Yeah, can I have few more queries with regard to the SOBD courses, particularly accounting and economics? Yeah, so Okay, so let me give you one more instance of how this anthropological aspect uh, have a greater meaning. Leonardo da Vinci, everybody knows that he was a multifaceted personality. He was a mathematician. He was a very good painter. So one of the paintings which everybody knew is that Last Supper, but not many of us know that he took the guidance before he started putting that painting from none other but Lucas Pacioli. Now, what is interesting to know in this case is that Lucas Pacioli actually helped him understand geometry and geometrical designs. The underlying fact, what interests me as a professor, we're going to take the accounting and economics, considering the liberal arts and design thinking, is that more or less it is the art that is, the way you communicate, and what the way you communicate, how do you influence the participant society, and how do you make it relevant so that they could understand and can try to make decisions. I think that seems to be more important than putting a template which for them takes them into more difficulties and make their life more miserable. I'm going to put this very clearly that the traditional way of accounting, the way we understand accounting today, there is going to be there is going to be a question on whether the systems and the processes, particularly from the accounting standpoint, is sustainable. Uh, are they answering the genuine problems which society are facing? And I think from that perspective, uh, the anthropological dimension is having its own importance. So, in the present course, the anthropology would be taught not from the point of view as an anthropologist, but from the, from the point of view of how the managers, the business executives, the entrepreneurs, the social entrepreneurs would be able to understand the logic of accounting and can use that logic back into their business so that they can benefit the society at large, where the motives are not limited to profit making, but the motives for them in particular would be to enlarge the scope where society and community can get benefits. Where I say benefits, I'm also saying that where they can get satisfaction of whatever they need in their life. So when I say satisfaction, the idea of satisfaction here is that they feel satisfied with whatever minimum resources they can acquire. The definition of markets need a considerable change. When we say the markets are free, essentially it is not free. The markets are not free. The markets are controlled by a group of people who have a larger stake and they influence the markets. Market is not meant for people like you and me. Markets are meant for people who could manipulate the markets. The prices which you see in the market, let's take it for that matter, the stock prices are not the prices which are in realistic sense is the prices which need to be there. So there is always a question, that what is the fair value, what is the fair price, what is the real price? And I think these questions are going to be phased out in the considerable manner in this particular course. So I think I would like to push myself in telling you this, that more or less, if accounting need to be understood, it has to be understood as a subject which has its own aspects. One of aspect is, of course, to ensure that it fits into the template of double entry bookkeeping. But beyond that, is accounting as a subject meaningful? And I think from that perspective, I would like to speak about. Okay, so I think it's imperative to know that at a certain moment we have certain moment we realize that the machinery, the economic machinery under which the institutions are working, are also subject of discussions back in the classes. So I think one of the methodology which I think I would be favoring is that the students would be expected to bring some contemporary topics, something which fascinated them, something which they think need further discussion, something which may be troubling them. Let them bring forth all these queries back in the session, in the classes, and there will be open forum where they can discuss whatever they feel, whatever they understand, and whatever they think they could, they could actually explain. So once they do that exercise, then we would take back in terms of how can they solve. So as a responsible citizen and as an economist or an accountant, how can they become responsible, and how can they design the solutions. So I think this is going to be a critical aspect which is going to be a regular phenomena in the classes which will be happening at SOBT. Shall we close? Half an hour is more than enough. Okay, so thank you very much. I think I enjoyed interacting, and I think I'm more than happy uh, to answer your queries. And I think it would be great fun to have you been part of discussions in the coming time. Thank you very much.